Chapter 11 of Born to Good Luck by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 11. Dick and Joe on the trail of Mudgett, Tim Bunker, and their dupe.
"You've been a mighty long time investigating matters," grumbled Joe Fletcher, poking his head over the seat when he heard his chum's voice, for he had retired to the interior of the wagon to keep warm.
"Perhaps I have," replied Dick as he climbed up into his perch and started the team.
"But I guess I'll surprise you when I tell you what I've seen and heard." "Well, I'm ready to hear the story," said Joe with mingled impatience and curiosity.
"Of course you've heard of William Fairclough, who keeps the stock farm at Walkhill," began Dick.
"Sure I have."
"And you've also heard he has a brother named Adam, who lives in the outskirts of Jayville, which is 6 miles from here."
"Yes, the folks of Walkhill call him Miser Fairclough."
"You've got it right. He occupies an old mansion, built some time before the Revolutionary War. He bought the place for a song, I heard, about 40 years ago. Well, there's a scheme on foot to rob old Fairclough tonight, and it's up to us to head it off."
"Rob the miser?" exclaimed Joe in astonishment.
"Exactly. He's been decoyed away to Walkhill by a bogus letter which informed him that his brother William is dead."
"Gee, you don't mean it."
"I overheard a large part of the scheme by listening just outside of the kitchen door that opens on the entry."
"Then it was a gang of robbers you found in the house?"
said Joe in open-mouthed wonder. "I found a man and 2 boys," answered Dick. "But before I say anything more, we'll unharness the team and make them comfortable for the night." The 2 boys lost no time in getting the horses into the barn and putting before them a plentiful supply of oats. "Did you ever run across a fellow named Tim Bunker in Walkhill?" asked Dick, taking up the thread of his story again, as he dived into their provision hamper and fished up a couple of egg sandwiches, one of which he handed to his chum, with a remark that time was precious, and that was all he might expect to eat for some hours.
"I've heard of Tim Bunker," said Joe with a nod as they walked toward the road. "He's a hard nut. What about him?"
"He's mixed up in this affair."
"Is that so?"
"Can't say I'm much surprised."
"And who do you imagine the other boy to be?"
"I couldn't guess." "No, I don't think you could. Don't fall down now when I tell you. It's Luke Maslin."
"Luke Maslin?"
exclaimed Joe, stopping stock still in the middle of the road. "Yes, Luke Maslin," repeated Dick, enjoying his friend's astonishment.
"He's in pretty bad company. Why, what's he doing way down here, 30 miles from the corner?"
"That's what surprised me at first. But from what Tim Bunker said in the kitchen while I was taking it all in from behind the door, I've got a pretty clear idea of the way Luke has got himself into this pickle. It seems he did take that $5 out of his father's money drawer that I was accused of stealing."
"I guessed he was a thief,"
nodded Joe conclusively. "Then he foolishly boasted of it to Tim Bunker, thinking he had done a clever thing. Now it looks as if Tim took advantage of this knowledge to force Luke to join him and the man Mudgett in an enterprise they have in hand without letting him know exactly what they intended to do."
"What makes you think he didn't know?"
"Because it looked to me as if they'd just been explaining the real situation to him before I came on the scene, for he was kicking against it like a mule."
"He was, eh?"
"Yes. Mudgett and Tim Bunker were sharp enough to put Luke in a tight box before they took him into their confidence."
"How?"
"They had him deliver the decoy note to Adam Fairclough. It was a mean trick, for it implicates Luke in the job, as they intended it should. That puts him completely in their power, don't you see?"
"I wouldn't be in his shoes for a mint,"
said Joe as they turned into the road leading to Jayville.
"But it serves him right for stealing that money from his father, and then when it come out, letting you shoulder all the blame. He wouldn't have opened his mouth to clear you if you'd been arrested for the theft and put in village lockup,"
he added indignantly.
"I guess you're right,"
admitted his chum.
"Of course I'm right. Didn't he give you away to his father the moment he spied you hid down in the hold of the canal boat?"
"He certainly did, and I think I could have thrashed him for it if I'd had the chance. I felt like doing it."
"And my fist just tingled to get a rap at him, too,"
blurted Joe.
"He's in a pretty bad hole now, all right. If we can prevent this burglary tonight, it is possible we can save him from some of the consequences of his foolishness. I shouldn't think you'd care to waste much consideration on a fellow who for years treated you as mean as Luke has done," said Joe in some surprise. "I don't say he deserves anything of me, but I'm still willing to do what I can to save him from going to prison." said Dick generously. Well, I don't know what you expect to do. You're the captain, and I'm going in blind after you. But if you've a scheme for catching these fellows, and we do catch 'em, I suppose Luke could turn state's evidence and escape the penalty. Very likely. I'm sorry you're getting mixed up in this matter, said Joe gloomily. Why so? Said Dick, looking at his companion in surprise. You wouldn't stand off and allow that old man to be robbed when you might be able to prevent it, would you? I don't mean that, but you forget that we are liable to be detained as witnesses if a capture is made, and that'll give Silas Maslin a chance to get a hold of you again. Dick stopped short and regarded his chum for a moment in silence. He had not thought of that unpleasant contingency. This will make a slight change in my plans, he said suddenly. I intended to get help to tackle these fellows, but I think now it will do as well if we succeed in scaring them off. I'm satisfied if we can put a spoke in their wheel, and it'll do away with the difficulty you mentioned. To this plan Joe agreed with alacrity. The sky, which had been overcast up to this point, now began to show through here and there in patches, and ere long the imprisoned moon sailed into these spaces, and her light occasionally illuminated the landscape. One of these spells of moonshine showed the boys the distant spire of the Jayville Methodist Church and the roofs of many of the houses. The Fairclough mansion is over yonder, said Dick, pointing in the direction. I remember Mr. Maslin pointing it out to me a year ago when we drove down here one day on business. We'll cut across this meadow and save at least 2 miles by the road. On the other side of the field was a clump of trees. Dick pointed out a couple of branches that would make stout cudgels, and he and Joe were presently in possession of a pair of serviceable weapons. As they cautiously drew near the Revolutionary relic, they made out 3 indistinct figures hovering about the building. Suddenly the figures clustered about a rear window that was high above their reach, and Dick and Joe saw one of them mount on the shoulders of another and commence operations by splintering the glass with a blow of some implement. At that interesting juncture the boys' ears caught the sound of approaching wheels, and before they realized what was about to happen, a miserable-looking buggy, drawn by a thin, bony mare, dashed into the unkempt driveway and rattled up to the porch. The occupant of the ramshackle vehicle showed up in the moonlight to be an old man of at least 80 years, wrapped in a faded green overcoat, with a comforter of some indescribable color tucked about his throat, the ends floating in the night air. His approach had been discovered by the would-be burglars, and the 2 who had formed the base of the pyramid, that had just boosted a third through the fractured window, rushed around to the front of the house and attacked the old man from 2 sides. That must be Adam Fairclough, explained Dick, he and Joe springing to their feet. He must have met somebody on the road who told him that his brother wasn't dead, and thus aroused his suspicions that something was wrong at this end of the business, and so he came right back. These rascals may kill him if we don't interfere, Joe. So come on, let's take him by surprise. Thereupon both boys leapt the fence and, flourishing their cudgels, rushed to the rescue. End of chapter 11.